Hey guys, it's Christine, also known as IvyWinter. Thank you for joining me for another Disneyland Paris video, international Disney video. I don't know, it's a little bit broader than my other videos, but I wanted to talk about traveling to international parks solo. So Disneyland Paris was the first time that I did a solo trip internationally anywhere, actually. I have been to a lot of different places, but usually I've traveled with friends, family, or my husband, and I've never set off on an international trip alone. Granted, later on the trip, my husband did meet up with me and I wasn't alone, but for Disneyland Paris, I was completely solo, and flying out of New York to Paris, I was totally solo, and that was my first experience doing that. So I'm sure I'm not the only person who has taken an interest in doing an international Disney park alone. I know in a lot of cases we want to do this trip and we wait for other people to commit to it, and it never happens. And I'm a big proponent of, if you wait around for other people to do something, you will never do that thing. So you need to just get up and go on your own. So if you've been thinking about doing it and you kind of want to know a little bit about the experience, I've got a few tips for traveling internationally to Disney parks solo, though I guess a couple of these could also apply to international traveling by yourself in general, but these are a little bit more Disney centric. Number one, prepare how you're getting out of the airport and where you need to go to get to where you're going as early as possible. I looked up the airport map like 2 weeks, 3 weeks in advance, and I sat down and I said, okay, I know my plane is coming in on this terminal. How do I get to the train station, which is what I was taking, something called the TVC, which is a high-speed train that goes to Disneyland. And I had to look and say, how am I getting from point A to point B? And even when I got to the airport, it was still a little confusing. But for the most part, I had an understanding that I needed to get to a certain station, that it was going to be a little bit to get out of the terminal and get over there, and I had that preparation in my head. I bought my TVC ticket in advance, even though I could have done it there, but I figure why add that added stress while you're in an airport that you don't know, in a different country. You might as well have the ticket ready and printed to go before you go wherever you're going. So this is if you're going from, say, a plane to any other transportation, bus, train, what have you. You might be taking a cab. Make sure you know how to get to where the cabs pick you up. If you are taking another mode of transportation, look up your destination name. I had to make sure that I knew the name of the train station, because it's not just called Disneyland Paris, when I was traveling, and so I'd know what stop to get off from the airport. Luckily for me, it was the first stop, so there really wasn't too much thinking, but I had to make sure that I was going in the right direction. You know, there's a lot that you want to think about before you make those travel plans, and to like calm that anxiety of feeling like you don't know where you're going, do as much research before you even leave for your trip, so you know exactly where to go. You know when you get in the cab exactly what to tell them, what the address is, etc. Number two, I would say keep connected with a SIM card or travel plan on your phone. SIM cards are great. They're really cheap. You can get them in any airport at any country that you go into. I've done this before. You pop out your SIM card and put in the new one. If you don't know how to do it, they can do it for you. They'll put your old SIM card in a little baggie to keep safe, because trust me, you do not want to lose your SIM card. That is like all of your data for your phone. If you don't want to go the SIM card route and you do have an option through your provider, you might want to look into that. SIM cards are cheaper for me, and I normally do it, but this trip I decided I just didn't want to have the hassle. I didn't want to take the time in the airport when I knew I already had to catch a train. So I decided to turn on my international travel through my Verizon account. I believe Verizon's deal is $10 every 24 hours that you are traveling. So if you turn your phone on to roam at 11 a.m. on Monday, it will note that. It will say, okay, your international traveling plan has been turned on, and then you pay $10 till 11 a.m. the next day. If you are still using your phone at 11 a.m. or 11:01 the next day, okay, it charges you another $10 for another 24 hours. So the nice thing about this is you can go into airplane mode on days you don't want to use it or feel like you don't need it and save a few bucks. So the reason why I even say do this is because I think it's important to have some contact back at home, especially when you're by yourself. So to be able to text whoever you need to text, or get online or any of that. It's a nice safety net, especially when you're alone. So I think it's important to have that communication, even if you're not at home. Number 3 is have some cash on hand just in case, even though I will say with Disneyland Paris, my card went a really long way, and I've heard that the same for other international parks, but it's always good to have some of the money from that country on your possession just in case. Disneyland Paris had ATMs. I imagine other parks, Hong Kong and them, do as well. So a lot of our cards now, it's very easy to get money out at foreign ATMs because most banks have no foreign transaction fees anymore, and you're pretty well protected now that we all have the chip in our cards. So I definitely took time to go to the Disneyland Paris ATM and get a few euros out just so I had it, just in case for some reason I couldn't pay with credit card or something went wrong with my credit card, which I did have a moment where, despite Capital One saying, oh yeah, you don't have to tell us you're traveling, they still flagged it as fraud. That happens. So if you need to quickly pay for something while you're figuring that out, always have cash on hand. Number 4, I would say stay on property, because as one last thing to think about is, how do I get from point A to point B if I'm staying on a hotel off property? I think for me, it's a bit of a safety thing. I trust in Disney. I trust in the brand. I trust in the kind of bubble that they put you in. So as a solo traveler, I knew I was not going to entertain the idea of staying off property. I felt safer, more confident, and like I really understood how to get around when staying on property. So I would 100% say, especially if it is your first trip to said park, stay on property. It's just going to make your life simpler. You're going to feel a little bit better. Highly recommend. And number 5 is ride single rider, and it applies everywhere else too. So, Disney World and Disneyland are not just the only places with single rider. Disneyland Paris had a couple of single rider lines. Crush's Coaster comes to mind. Space Mountain comes to mind. And of course, if you are a single rider on other rides, they do the same thing where when they need to fill in a single rider, they'll call for you and you might be able to skip a whole bunch of people. But definitely take advantage of single rider. It was invaluable with Crush's Coaster. They said the standby for the regular line was like 70 minutes. I got on in 20 through single rider. It's also really great for Space Mountain, though you won't see much of the queue, but I found it totally worth it because I was able to get on Space Mountain in also about 20 to 25 minutes the first time that I rode it. So always take advantage of single rider. That is always one of my biggest tips, whether you're solo in Disney World, Disneyland Paris, Tokyo Disneyland, I don't know, like Future Space Disneyland. God, that would be so cool. Just use the single rider line. It's gonna be a huge benefit for you. So those are 5 of my traveling to Disney parks internationally solo tips. That was a weird sentence. Let me try that again. So those are my 5 tips about traveling solo to international Disney parks. That makes more sense. If you have any other tips, if you've done this yourself, let me know in the comments below. If you have specific questions about going alone, also let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, then like it. If you like me, you should subscribe and make videos every single week. I'm doing a little bit more in Disneyland Paris in the next week or 2 because I've had a lot of people asking me to do so. We've got a book club going on. That's been really fun. We're reading Bob Iger's memoir, so if you want to get in on that, there'll be more information in the description below. That's it, guys. I am about to just plan my next international trip because talking about all of this is making me really want to go to Shanghai or something. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great rest of the day. Bye.